Okay, we now have Kristy Alger. So she's an organizer, activist, theorist, and writer living in Tasmania on Murrurumbina country. She is currently sitting president for Animal Liberation Tasmania and formerly co-founded a Tasmanian Animal Save chapter. So she's going to teach you how to break apart advertisement. All right. There you go.
Thank you. Just like to acknowledge that we are standing on the lands of the Kaurna people, over which sovereignty was never ceded, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So media literacy, I mean, that's such an expansive topic really, like there's so much gets pumped into the media, but advertising is possibly one of the most pervasive aspects of media content today, and you can't escape it. Whether you want to or not, it's everywhere you look. It's like the commons of the visual space has been enclosed and sold for profit. So today I'm just going to go through a few examples of advertising over the past decades, try and read them, look at the historical contexts that those adverts were created in, and have a bit of a laugh along the way with some of it, because damn, there's some creepy people in these adverts. And then at the end, I'm going to have a look at, you know, a little bit of subversive ways to get advertising out of the visual space. So we're going to go back to 18th, 19th century England, to the Industrial Revolution. And new technologies became this massive thing, you know, that industrialized manufacture and production in the country before spreading throughout Europe. And one of these particular technologies was the spinning jenny. And the spinning jenny had a purpose of transforming raw materials into profitable textiles, utilizing a single wheel to spin 8 separate spindles. And it revolutionized textiles. There was massive dissent at the time by people who were labeled Luddites. And that's a term that's used as a slur against anybody who's anti-technology these days. And the Luddites would go in, smash jennies, smash the spinning wheels, because they were scared that they were going to lose their jobs and lose their traditional ways of life. And as it turned out, they were right. And really, Luddite isn't a bad thing to be. Now, I'm drawing your attention to this because advertising operates on the same basis as these machines, converting a raw material into a finished commodity. And you might think that that might be the raw material if you look at something and the commodity is, you know, buying the burger. However, Tim Wu, in his book, The Attention Merchant, describes how the billboard, the bus shelter insert, the radio jingle, or the TV advert all act as a form of spinning jenny, a very effective mechanism through which the raw commodity of your attention is converted into the finished product. It's actually your consumption that is the product. Consumption is marketable, and it is why advertising agencies are paid billions of dollars. It doesn't matter if it's a burger or a t-shirt or a pair of shoes. That's actually almost irrelevant when it comes to advertising. What is relevant is that they're selling your consumption. So one of the tools that they use is dissatisfaction. This is a mechanism of industrial conversion. This is the spindle on the spinning jenny. It is a crucial component of advertising. And in early 2020, Professor Andrew Oswald from the University of Warwick released research that showed a direct correlation between increased levels of spending on advertising and a nation's decrease in life satisfaction. The more money spent, the more life dissatisfaction was reported, and it spanned data from 1980 to 2011, 27 European countries and nearly 1 million people. So it was pretty conclusive. So advertising as a machine generates within the consumer base the desire to own something or to be something, to belong to something, to have a specific identity, a community, patriotism, nationalism. It's really about tapping into your dissatisfaction in life and making you want to have it. It inculcates people with a general sense of lack that invariably leads to the desired finished product consumption. So I'm going to take you to the 80s, and I'm not sure you're going to be able to see these particular pictures well, so I'll give them a bit of a description. So in 1980s, in the USA, an advertising campaign, Milk, It Does a Body Good, was launched. So the narrative was really, really simple. Milk, it's natural and it's normal and it's necessary. It's full of vitamins and essential for the kids' growth and vitality. And the way they expressed that growth and vitality was having kids drink milk and start to grow up into adults in the adverts. Now, for the boys grew up to be muscle-bound hunks and, you know, really strong and athletic and this real fantasy of strength and power. In the adverts here, we've got a girl in a pink dress, and in her mirror, she's an adult with a husband. So girls became sexually desirable women that were consumed by men. So there's the fantasy of attraction. But my favorite one really delves into the idea of animal exploitation and male violence as it was depicted in the 80s. In this particular advert, a small child is being bullied by two bigger kids. And as he drinks his glass of milk, espousing the virtues of, I'm going to grow up to be strong because of my glass of milk, and look at how tall I'm getting, he gets stronger, more articulate. And then, once he attains his adult size, he turns to his bullies and goes, I might have forgiven you by the time I'm an adult, but why risk it? Implying that he's going to beat the crap out of them when he's bigger than them, and it's all because milk gave him the strength and the power and the control. So milk does a body good actually meant that you would be a muscly, strong, attractive, powerful, in control, and desirable adult. You would fit into the desired community. And it can also be viewed as a pushback against the growing feminist movement of the 1980s, which at the time, huge social changes were being experienced as women, and women's autonomy was absolutely at the center of social commentary, movement through the workplace, and breaking down barriers in the home were really occurring, and that meant breaking down a lot of the gender stereotypes. So what the dairy industry were doing here with the Milk Does a Body Good campaign were confirming for people that what we have with the patriarchy and gender roles is what we will continue to have because it is desirable. So they weren't just selling milk, they were selling the patriarchy as well. And that's one of the powerful tools that advertising will use. So this is the power of tradition. And God, I wish you could see this image really clearly because it's friggin' wonderful. So we've got this guy at the head of a table carving up pig flesh. And he's the creepiest person I've ever seen in a beige cardigan. And the whole advert came out in 1984. And this guy is so creepy that I've seen comments online about it that say that they actually think he's eating the neighbor and not a pig. Like, it's that he stands there as a white middle-class heteronormative head of the nuclear family, and he tells everybody there's plenty to go around. The table is full. His children are there and they've got enough to eat. His wife has got what it takes to cook the roast that he's now claiming credit for by cutting up. Meanwhile, in 1980s England, massive unemployment, strikes, police brutality, and riots were kicking off as industries were being shut down and austerity measures were implemented under the Tories. People were literally starving to death in the UK in the 80s because of Tory policies. And people were angry, and society was changing rapidly because people weren't sitting back and taking it anymore. So what you actually saw was a real undermining of trust in the police, a real attack on the political institutions, and this shift away from traditional norms and values that people were scared of. And so British pork tapped into that so that pig flesh became synonymous with order, tradition, respectability. You know, that's the brand you can trust while the whole world burns. And this is something, you know, the tradition and, you know, doing it for the country that's been prevalent in advertising for quite some time. These are 3 adverts from wartime USA, released by the American Meat Institute. That's now the North American Meat Institute, which is the largest, most powerful meat lobbying group in the USA today. So during World War II, they ran advertising campaigns that emphasized the importance of meat, production, innovation, and manufacturing for the war effort. So tinned meat that was getting sent over to the front lines. I mean, the good thing about tinned meat was they could put anything in that, slap enough gravy on it, nobody knew what was in the tin, and nobody really cared. But it looked good and innovative, but it was patriotic too because they were supporting the troops. Bacon was another area of innovation that they really played into, because before this, they just used to send whole slabs of cured pig flesh to the front lines, and it would be divvied up in the canteens. But now it got put in pretty gold foil and sliced evenly. And so that was seen as a massive contribution to the war effort, and that came from our farmers. So then also meat for the convalescent fighter. Look at this poor young man. He's had a hard time in the trenches on the front line. He's probably given himself a blighty anyway, but you know, we're going to feed him an entire day's, like an entire week's rationing for one person for one day. So this is meat for a man. And that's literally how they promoted it, meat for a man, because that's how you heal a man who shot himself in the foot. You give him red meat. After the war, they had to change tack. They still use this nice, pretty bright red that attracts attention. But they, during the war, of course, the front lines was a market base for meat production. And ironically, during World War II, the domestic American had a healthier diet that was less meat-centric and more vegetable-based, higher in fibre, and actually better for them because of rationing. But post-World War II, they had to actually start to get the general consumer to eat more meat, otherwise the market was going to fall. And so to achieve this, the AMI tapped into social insecurities relating to food accessibility and the social and political changes. They promoted meat as being normal, natural, and necessary. And they also advertised that all meat, irrespective of where it came from, whether it was a ribeye or whether it was a ground up shitty hot dog, they said it was all nutritionally equal. And this was especially important for children, considering how heavily rationed children had been when it came to a lot of food. So the ads also aimed at making people feel safe and reassured after the war. You know, all the political and social upheaval that occurred, and tapped into patriotism and national identity. What they did is they tapped into fear, uncertainty, and dissatisfaction of an entire population to sell increased amounts of dead animals to the masses and make it seem important as your identity as an American. But you can't hide from progress. And so the protein pack came out not that long ago. So the North American Meat Institute, as is now the AMI, they rapidly grew in their influence post-World War II, and they moved into laboratories and sciences and research and technologies to lobby politicians to give them access to subsidies and industry reforms to make a bigger profit. And that has necessitated a move away from using the traditional white nuclear family and expanding representation to include diverse communities to promote the meat industry as a modern leader in the economy. And here in Australia, we tap into that idea of national identity in our own advertising. So here's 3 stills from the Meat and Livestock Australia campaigns that they release every year for January 26. And every year they manage to offend a lot of people with this. So they launch these lamb adverts, hyping up the unifying power of a barbecue celebrating nationalism and patriotism. Most of them have a dig at vegans. Sometimes it's a more benign. So one from a couple of years ago, some vegans walk up the beach to the barbecue and someone goes, oh, what should we do about them? And they're like, they're not doing any harm. Some, however, got really violent. So in this one that featured Leland Chin, we actually had a situation where it was depicted military forces bursting into a vegan's room and setting it on fire because he had kale. And that year, I actually recall the online vitriol against vegans got actually a lot worse. People actually were saying, well, actually, why aren't we burning vegans anyway? It was really, really nasty. The most controversial one that's received the most criticism actually parodied the colonization of the continent by the First Fleet, where you had 3 Aboriginal people having a barbecue on a beach, and suddenly the English arrive, and then the French arrive, and then the Dutch arrive, and then suddenly the beach is packed out, but it's a laughable, joking moment. Everything's positive. There's enough to go around. But it works. The controversy that these adverts produce works, because around this time of year, sales of lamb peak, and the consumption of lamb flesh has become iconic to Australia Day celebrations. And in fact, I recall hearing on a radio interview on ABC Country some years ago, lamb flesh sales around Australia Day outstrip sales for Christmas. So that's how effective the MLA campaign has actually been. But there's one thing you might have noticed from those adverts. Who's missing? It's the animals. Where are they? And what we have are cases of erasure, of caricature, and humane washing. So when we look at caricatures of animals in advertising, I think this is one of the most iconic. This is the Chick-fil-A advertising. And it's cows holding up poorly spelt signs telling people to eat more chicken. And this one really, really shits me, because it's really depicting these cows as being quite silly and stupid. Like, oh my God, they can't even spell human words. Like, you know, and it really, really, really gets under my skin. I mean, apart from the fact that Chick-fil-A are one of the most homophobic companies to exist, actively funding anti-LGBTQI plus policies in other countries, including execution and imprisonment. But I have seen these ones subverted really successfully by vegans who have changed it to "don't eat cows." And I've seen actual like banners made of that hung from overpasses, and I've seen billboards altered to read that instead. But the reason why animals are caricatured is because it puts distance between the product and the consumer. We all know animals are in animal products, but if you can make it laughable, then it's okay. Most advertising of animal products will simply erase images of the animals. And because associating the product with an animal can risk the consumer actually empathizing with that animal, and you can't have that. So animals in this context, in an erasure context, become marketing ghosts. They are there, but they're not seen. But then there's my favorite, humane washing. This is where animals actually feature quite prominently in the adverts that promote their consumption. And the RSPCA, with their approved farming, are really at the head of that game. So they will actively show animals in a farming context with their massive logo, saying that this is okay. Animal protection agencies become corporate brands that the public associates with good outcomes for animals. So the general public will look at the RSPCA and they'll think Million Paws Walk, they'll think Cupcake Day, they'll think adoption of animals, rescue, they'll think investigation, they'll think that, yes, tangible positive outcomes for other animals. And then the corporate brand is used to humane wash the industry in advertising that allays and soothes the consumer concerns. Now, with RSPCA approved farming, what happens there is a business will approach them and be given a checklist of things that they need to do that are slightly above the standard. Now, for chicken farming, slightly above standard means a couple extra centimetres of bedding on the floor. It means lower stocking densities, and it means little orange plastic chains for the chickens to play with. It doesn't mean outdoors. There is nothing on the methods of slaughter. So literally, it's bullshit. But they will put these adverts everywhere, and they're spending millions of dollars on these adverts because they know that RSPCA is trusted and they can actually make a profit from paying. So the farmer will pay the RSPCA $55,000 to use the logo every year on their product. And just to show how laughable it is, Humane Aquaculture, who have recently or have been consistently exposed for shooting seals in the face with explosives, have RSPCA approval for their salmon product. So how do you push back against advertising? Well, it's difficult. We can replicate corporate advertising techniques to sell vegan products and even to sell the idea of veganism in and of itself, but that kind of entrenches a lot of the advertising systems, and I've got to say it entrenches capitalism further. I think the most effective thing that you can do, and here is a disclaimer, I'm saying these things, these are not necessarily the view of Vegan Festival Adelaide. If you really want to push back against the advertising system that is so anti-animal and anti-human and anti-environment, you need to hack the ads themselves. There's a lot of ways you can do it. So you could do it online, or just, a little, just make up graphics or little banners like the "Don't Eat Cows" with the Chick-fil-A ad. You can muck about with it, do memes and those sorts of things. Or you can actually do it physically and in real life. So what we have here are two people in high vis. Trust me, you can get away with anything in public if you're wearing high vis. Again, that is just my view, and I'm not speaking for the festival. And they actually open up the advertising space on bus stops. This is Smash Speciesism. And they've replaced the advertising with a poster of their own that says, "Wear a face covering and smash up a butcher's shop." This was at the start of the pandemic. Now, in England. Now, Smash Speciesism have a very strong mutual aid and community support and protection ideal behind their activism. And they've been doing this all across England. And they've inspired other people around the world to do it as well. Just open it up, chuck on high vis, open it up. They're really easy to unlock, so I hear, and chuck up a poster of your own making. So basically, you just remove, you replace, and you erase speciesist anti-animal advertising. And I want to read you something that Smash Speciesism put out on their Facebook. And so this is, there's the trespass laws that are going through in the UK at the moment that are horrifically draconian. And they've changed this advertising for a beauty product to say, "Resist anti-trespass bill, trespass as you like." And they wrote, "They never asked us for permission. We never asked them either. Advertisement must be the single most in-your-face tool that capitalism uses, and the world is littered with it. From bus stops to huge billboards, public space is stolen from us to force us into the trading submission that keeps the world rolling. We reappropriated their posters and their designs, simply changing some words in the process. We showcased one of the sheep murdered at Forge Farm Meat Slaughterhouse. Today marks 1 year since we blockaded the site. We want folks to know that we are not done fighting. This can only get better. We did not pay Clear Channel, that's the company that owns the bus shelter spaces. We would never pay Clear Channel. Those spaces are as much ours as anybody's. Take them over unapologetically. Empty them so they stop selling. Paint your art. Write a shopping list for the closest food bank and leave a box underneath. The world is yours, and every advert is your canvas until we are all free. And I found this to be one of the most inspirational things I've ever read on Facebook. And let's face it, there's a lot of crap on Facebook, but this just, it leapt out at me. Because we cannot leave space for anti-animal advertising, for anti-environment advertising, or anti-human advertising. Advertising is generating us into a commodity. Our consumption is being commodified, and it's to the detriment of a lot of us, including the animal communities. And I think we have a responsibility to push back as hard as we can against that. And by understanding the historical context of advertising, as we've gone through with the 80s and the 40s and World War II, and more modern with the MLA here in Australia, we can actually pick apart, we can pull apart, and then we can subvert. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristy. I just wanted to know whether anyone had any questions for Kristy. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, she's going to the bar if anyone wants to go join her.